Hello, and welcome to Champagne Football, where we all get drunk because there's nothing else to do, or the football's been cancelled and we're caught isolating away from each other a million miles away. But this week is kind of special because not only do we have the usual beach apps in attendance, but we've also got one more special guest, Mr. Danny Clark. Let me introduce everybody as per usual, though. So, Becky, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, Ben, how you doing?
Yo, glad to be here.
And then we've got one more man who's more disappointed than any other because the Premier League season might get ended soon, which could mean that he does not win the St. Mary's fantasy team. Sorry, not the fantasy football team. Liverpool Premier League.
Yes, I'm not sure what I'm more worried about, the fact that I will not be winning the fantasy football league or the fact that Liverpool will not be winning the Premier League. It's a tight call.
There he is, Mr. Danny Clark. And it's a pleasure to have him. It's a pleasure to see what he values most on the line tonight. Is it his fantasy team, or is it the fact that Liverpool haven't won the league in God knows how many years?
30 years.
30 years. There it is. Yeah. So anyway, welcome to the show. We're going to start the usual way where we compare a drink to a football team. Becky, what have you got tonight?
So I'm drinking a Hobgoblin that my sister gave me a couple months ago, actually. And I'm going to compare it to Burnley tonight because it's a good, strong, consistent beer, but it's got a little bit of flair, just a little bit of hop to it. So definitely a Burnley drink tonight.
I like that because a few years ago, comparing a drink to Burnley would have been an insult. But I think when you compare what Sean Dyche has done to that team with an ale, and I'm sure he loves an ale, you know. I don't want to typecast him. I don't want to stereotype him, but I'm sure he loves
You can tell by his husky voice that he likes a good pint of ale after a good result.
It might be a fair stereotype, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt there. And Mr. Ben Chappell, what are you drinking, mate?
Today I have the Tiger World Acclaimed Asian Lager. So do with that what you will. It's going down smooth for me. It's got me feeling right. And I think the team that we are going to go with here is the Hull City Tigers.
Oh, of course, the perfect. That is the only fucking requirement.
We were debating between going with the Hull City Tigers or one of the Chinese Super League teams, maybe Shanghai Shenhua or something like that. But I think we're going to keep it English, and since Hull has got the Tiger Stripe kits, we're going to rock with Hull City.
Perfect. And Danny, making your debut, having your first ever drink. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking a nice 660ml bottle of Camden Hells. Comparing it to a team, I'd compare it to Wolverhampton Wanderers. Because Camden Hells is a trendy in-fashion lager. It's light, it's easy to drink. Just like Wolves are in fashion right now. They're easy to watch, nice attacking football. And also, Camden Hells is a London brewed lager.
Like Wolves.
But now it's exactly, well, not quite like Wolves. But it's also popular. Well, it's popular in Wales, and that says it all, really.
But for people not listening, Danny is from Wales, so.
I haven't got the strongest Welsh accent, but yes, I'm from Wales.
Shout out Camden Hells, though. I wish I had one of those right now.
Yeah, it's a very good drink. It's a very good drink.
It's a great beer.
And
it's getting popular everywhere, and just like Wolves have been popular, well, kind of popular in England for the last 20, 30 years. They're now in Europe. They're now popular elsewhere. Very similar to Camden Hells.
Beautiful. I think it's an apt description. It's a drink on the rise. It's a club on the rise, and that leads me to my drink. It's kind of difficult in these times of self-isolation because we're supposed to get a shipment in today of ale, but the click and collect just didn't have what my dear mum ordered. They just didn't have it, so they just replaced it with nothing. So I've got nothing to drink. So I'm raiding through the cupboards, and I found, I think it's been in the cupboard since Christmas. It's a nice Kraken, but I was struggling to compare the drink. So what do you guys think a good Kraken is? Becky, what do you reckon?
Well, I was going for a Chelsea because it's a good really good drink, you know, near the top, not quite the top tier, but they're hanging on in that top ranks for, you know, a pretty consistent time. But I think you might have had a bit more of a personal spin on that, Hal.
Yeah, well, I do 100% agree with your point that they're a good club and it's a good drink and it belongs somewhere. It's a Champions League level drink, right? So I understand why you say Chelsea, but just as an Arsenal fan, I'm not going to hide my Arsenal fan-ness. I just so I can't ever give a compliment to Chelsea. But yeah, fuck it, whatever. All right, crack in this Chelsea and just move on with your life. Okay. Yeah. All right. Now the drink part is over. We'll move on to the next segment, which sort of takes a lead from what we did in the last episode, which was where me, Ben, and Becky, or mostly me and Becky, because like as an Arsenal fan, as a Manchester United fan, we chose our worst teams in the Premier League era. And now as a special guest, we've got Danny Clark on, who, if you hadn't already guessed, or if we hadn't already said and forgotten because we're drunk, he is a Liverpool fan. So we're going to go through his worst 11. It's not most, it's just who he thinks weren't really up for the job. So Mr. Danny Clark, who's in goal for this abominable Liverpool team?
Yeah, so before I start, this team is pretty much based on from when I started watching football first, which is probably the 2003-04 season. So we're not going back too far, but obviously, as everyone probably knows, there's a lot of choices that could be in goal. We've got Loris Karius, Simon Mignolet. I could keep going on, but it's not either of those two. I've opted for Mr. Adam Bogdan.
Oh my God, what a choice. I have a close friend who's a Bolton fan, and I know Bogdan went to Bolton shortly after with that ginger bowl cut sort of hair.
I can remember, I think it was the season before we bought him. He was playing for Bolton in an FA Cup match, and he has an absolute worldie, which I'm guessing is the main reason why we signed him. But I mean, on his debut, he threw the ball into his own net. A couple of months later, against Exeter in the FA Cup, he conceded a goal straight from a corner against Exeter. I think he only played 6 games ever for Liverpool, but he was pretty much a disaster from day one.
Do you know what's weird is because he was so terrible, I assumed he went from Liverpool to Bolton, because that's a natural progression of ability.
Not the way around, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I didn't realise he went. So he was at Bolton.
I didn't realize that either.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. All right.
So way to start your career. Throw the ball in your own net. What a way to have the fans embrace you.
Love it. All right, Danny, who's next?
So I'm going to go to right back next. I had quite a few choices for this one. One name stood out, but I've moved away from him after research and found out another better choice. His name is Philip Dagan. I'm not sure if any of you guys know who he is.
I've never heard that name in my life.
I'll hold my hands up and say I've got no idea.
Yeah,
So
I've got no clue either.
He was a Swiss defender that signed for us. I think it was around 2006, 2007. So on his competitive debut, he broke 2 ribs and punctured his lung in a collision with Sami Hyypiä.
Oh my God, with his own player?
Yeah. Then 2 months later, in his return game, he then broke his metatarsal.
I shouldn't be laughing.
And then he recovered for a couple of weeks. And then he broke his metatarsal again in a reserve game against Manchester United.
What?
And then finally, over the pre-season, he actually played really well. I watched him in a few friendlies. Then he made his first competitive league start in a game against Fulham, and it was quite a big deal for him. And he got sent off in that game for hauling down Clint Dempsey. So that pretty much summed up his Liverpool career.
Can I just say, like, as an avid football fan, I always feel a bit guilty when you mention a player that I've not heard of, but considering his injury record, like, fucking hell.
It's no sort of disrespect to his quality, but I mean, if you get injured 3 times and the one chance you do get when you don't get injured, you get sent off, I can't really give you any give you any credit.
No, there's no
Yeah.
love.
To be honest, I'm kind of surprised we haven't heard of him with a story like that.
Yeah. Poor guy broke all the bones in his body and he got thrown in the worst Liverpool ever starting 11.
Yeah.
Virgil's pocket, no love.
Unlucky, mate.
It reminds me of Jonathan Woodgate. But anyway, Danny, carry on.
So, I'll move over to right back now. No, left back.
Trent.
And
Oh,
so this guy, I think his name says it already. Paul Konchesky.
oh my God.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, this was the era when we had a team full of baldies, which were
Was this
useless at
the Roy
football.
Hodgson era?
Bunch of skin.
Yeah.
Man.
And Paul Konchesky was probably, I mean, John Joe Selby was bad, but Paul Konchesky was probably the worst of the lot.
Well, definitely. Just a terrible player. I remember getting him on fantasy. And then getting him out of my team within the same week, having them not played a single game because I was like, what the fuck am I doing?
That says it all.
We don't even need to elaborate. That's enough. That's enough on Paul Konchesky.
So with those two fantastic fullbacks, in between them, I've got two even better centre-backs. I mean, I was spoilt for choice, really, with the options for the last 10, 15 years, but I've opted for Stephen Corker and Jimmy Traore.
Stephen Corker.
I mean, okay, I'll start with Stephen Corker. This was in Jurgen Klopp's first season, and I think we had a bit of an injury crisis at centre back, or it appeared that time when we signed him. We signed him on a 6-month loan from Southampton. About 2 weeks after we'd beaten Southampton 6-1 in the League Cup when he was in their defence.
Yeah.
And we signed him as obviously as his position, which was a centre back. And I think he played 3 games for Liverpool in those 6 months, and they were all as a substitute in the last 5 minutes as a target striker, as a target number 9.
I feel like he came on against Arsenal in one of those games, maybe in a game where you might have won it in the last minute with a Joe Allen goal. Like,
Oh, he definitely did, yeah.
yeah, I think he did. Like, it's not. I wouldn't ever. This is just going off memory, so I wouldn't ever.
I think did that game finish 3-3? Because I think he came on with like 5 minutes left, and he knocked down a header, forced Joe Allen to equalise.
Exactly. Yeah, that was his peak. That's why I think it's a little bit harsh, because when you have such a big moment where you get a point against the Arsenal, and you've got Dejan Lovren who's sitting there, I guess presumably on the bench. Why didn't you choose Lovren?
I mean, a lot of hate gets given to Lovren, but I do feel like on his day he's a really really good defender.
Really?
Big
I
word.
mean, I do think he was a massive part of Croatia getting to the the World Cup finals in 2018.
It's a fair point.
I won't deny
And
that.
the thing is, he's one of those players that can play really well for 3 months, but then he has one bad game and he gets remembered for that one bad game.
And I'm pretty sure you've thrown a lot of hate at him over the last few months, though.
Oh, I have. Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to deny it.
Yeah, you're defending him now, but I don't know about this.
I mean, when I'm in a pub watching a live match, I will definitely give him some hate because he's not good enough, but he doesn't quite make my most hated / worst Liverpool 11.
No, he's definitely you've had worse center backs than Lovren for sure.
Yeah.
I'll accept that.
I think what quality right now.
Yeah, we'll accept it.
So partnering Stephen Corker in defence, I've gone for Jimmy Traore. He was more of a right back when he played for Liverpool, but he did play centre back a couple of games.
Yeah, I remember him as a right back, but I also remember him as a terrible player.
I mean, I don't really have to say anything, but if you need to see how bad he was, just YouTube Jimmy Traore own goal versus Burnley.
Sorry, not to interrupt, but can I let you on a little industry secret?
Yeah.
So when you said Jimmy Traore, I quickly picked up my phone and Googled him, and I'd only written Jimmy, and then the third thing to come up on my Google search was own goal. So I think that sort of defines his career.
So I'll try and give you a little bit of a picture in your minds. I think it was a 3rd round FA Cup match in 2005, and we went to Turf Moor when Burnley were possibly in the Championship or League One. And I think one of their wingers smashed the ball across the 6-yard box. And Jimmy Traore somehow did a 360 turn and back-heeled the ball into the bottom corner. Possibly one of the best own goals I've ever seen. And we lost that match because of that goal.
Beautiful.
So that's a back four of Philip Dagan, Stephen Kolker, Jimmy Traore, and Paul Konchesky.
Formidable.
I'll go on to my right mid now.
I just watched the own goal, by the way. That was definitely worthy of the 11.
And this right mid is probably the one I didn't want to put in my team, because when we signed him, I was really, really excited. I thought, what a player, this guy's going to be brilliant. We signed him for, I think it was just over 20 million from Benfica, and he was one of the most exciting wingers probably in world football at the time. That might be a bit of an over-exaggeration, but he was a good player. And his name is Lazar Markovic.
Wasn't he still like on the books of the clubs? Didn't you loan him out until quite recently? Is he still at Liverpool, or is he gone?
I think this is probably the main reason why I put him in, because the first couple of years he wasn't brilliant, but he had little glimpses where you could see his full potential.
Get minutes here and there, I remember, but I do remember all of my Liverpool friends like being so excited for this guy. They're like, "Watch out, we've got this guy, Markovic. Yeah. He's been tearing up the Portuguese league. Like, you guys have no idea." Absolutely, just ghosted everybody and disappeared into the.
He's been tearing up the St. Mary's kickabout on Tuesday.
I mean, I think, he played for probably 2 years with us, and then he went on loan to Fenerbahce, and I think he went on a loan to Hull City, and he's really good at Hull.
No.
And at this point, I was thinking, he's still a good player, but then he came back to us a year and a half ago, I think it was, and for literally that year and a half, he wasn't even in our reserves team, he was just on our books, just taking 50 grand a week, not staying fit, not making any effort. So for that reason, I've put him in my worst 11.
Can I just say, that's a good name, Lazar Markovic. I
think that's part of the attraction of why I liked him. It just sounds like quite a nice, exciting winger's name.
He sounds like he should be like a Hollywood movie star or something.
Indeed.
Lazar Markovic, or like a bad guy in a James Bond movie.
Yeah.
All right, who's up next? Danny.
So on the other wing, again, I feel a bit bad about this guy because he did have a really good career before he came to Liverpool. I think he came to Liverpool probably in his late 20s. But when you're a winger and in your first 36 games in your first season, you get 0 goals, 0 assists, you can't really make any excuse. So it's Stuart Downing.
Stuart Downing. Do you know what's interesting? I'm not sure if this completely worked out, but they would have had Stuart Downing on the left wing, and they would have had probably Ashley Young on the right wing, and possibly James Milner in centre mid. I don't know if and maybe Gareth.
I'm not sure if James Milner was. I don't know. James Milner would have still been. Yeah. So they had a really good. That's when Aston Villa was it under Martin O'Neill? A really good team.
Yeah, Martin O'Neill. It was about 2010, maybe a little. Around 2010. Give a year either side. But you think that the leagues they've won, the leagues they would have won in James Milner's case. Sorry. No.
Nice little dig there.
Yeah, sorry. But that's the quality. I think they signed Stuart Downing and then they signed Andy Carroll quite soon after, didn't they? And you can see the obvious mathematics, a guy who can cross it and a guy who can header.
Indeed. Didn't work out though. Did not work out.
They should have had their throw-in coach at that point. Maybe Andy Carroll could have gotten a few of those in.
So with Stuart Downing on one wing and Lazar Markovic on the other, I've opted for a midfield 2. Again, worryingly, there was a lot of choice for these 2 centre midfield positions.
Sorry.
But I've gone with Alberto Aquilani.
Oh my God.
Aquilani, I forgot that name.
And I'm not sure if many people know that he actually played for Liverpool, but Christian Poulsen.
Yes! He was in oh my God. What a fucking terrible player.
Oh, okay. So I'll start with Christian Poulsen.
Please do.
I can remember because I think we signed him for just under 5 million.
Yeah, you did.
And we bought him probably in his peak years. He was just about to turn 30. But as soon as he started playing, he looked more like he was 60. It was embarrassing.
I don't know why I have a sort of affinity with Christian Poulsen. I don't know why I'm so, because he's so bad. I should like any other normal fan of another football club should have no sort of awareness of him being a Liverpool player because he just made not a single dent in that football club. He was just not relevant at all. But for some reason, he just hangs in my memory. It's just, they signed him and then it was like they'd signed, they'd signed a 60-year-old.
I mean, like, he
They
signed for Liverpool.
Juventus.
Yeah, I mean, they signed him during the era when it was like his real chance to, like, sort of anchor that midfield. But within a few weeks, he got dropped for Jake Spearing, and Jake Spearing anchored that midfield instead. So that says it all, really.
Can I ask you, because I had a friend recommend a player, and this is me being drunk right now. I can't remember if he played on the wing or up front, but
Yeah.
it was Jake Jones, our friend of the pod, who recommended the player. Is it El Hadj Diouf?
He is on my bench for one of my forwards.
So he is a forward. Yeah, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Again, I just needed to know that.
I mean, he was a pretty terrible footballer, but his antics in terms of his spitting and his comments in the media make him, he'd definitely make my most hated 11.
Yeah.
This is my, like, the worst quality 11, but most hated 11, he would definitely be in there.
All right, that's good to know. All right, carry on, sir.
Partnering Christian Poulsen in central midfield is Alberto Aquilani. We signed him as a replacement for Xabi Alonso, and he cost, I think it was about 20 million. But he picked up an injury, I think, just as soon as we signed him, and basically it was a nightmare from the very start.
That's a tough act to follow, though.
Exactly.
Yeah, big shoes to fill, to say the least.
Was that about the time where you signed Charlie Adam as well? Because I remember having a FIFA career and being like, before they'd ever played again, I was like, it was real good fun when you got like Aquilani, who was quite highlight.
Around 2010, you guys were such a banter club.
I know.
I can't believe the quality of players that were coming in and out of Liverpool around 2010.
Paul Konjeski at fucking like in defence, and then you've got
And like
Charlie Adam and Aquilani holding down the fort.
Yeah, and Stuart
I mean, it was
Downing, Andy Carroll, man. It was just signing after signing was just pure jokes.
It was between Christian Poulsen and Charlie Adam for that midfield place, aside Aquilani. But I mean, Aquilani, I think he was 2 to 3 years, maybe just 2 years before Charlie Adam. But I would have loved to have seen a midfield partnership of Aquilani and Charlie Adam, because that would have been pretty entertaining.
I think the phrase banter era was like coined during that Liverpool time.
It must have been.
Oh, definitely. So yeah, the midfield of Markovic and Downing on the wings, Aquilani and Poulsen in central midfield, and then at striker I had 4 options, and I had to narrow it down to 2. You've already mentioned one, which is El Hadji Diouf. He hasn't quite made the cut, and the other one that didn't quite make the cut was Iago Aspas, who probably took the worst corner I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I think
he managed to salvage a career for himself. But
I mean, he's fantastic for Celta Vigo in La Liga now. He's scoring over 20 goals a season.
Yeah.
So fair play to him, but he was absolutely awful at Liverpool.
It was not good for you guys. I think I remember that corner kick that you're talking about as well.
It was against Chelsea when we had to score a goal to equalise to basically go on to win the league. And
did
he
they
passed it to
counter-attack and score?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I remember that. Unlucky Aspas.
So the 2 that I've opted with up front are Andrei Voronin and Mario Balotelli.
I would have been completely shocked if you did not have Balotelli in your team.
I mean, Balotelli, he was signed as a replacement for Luis Suarez in the same summer we let go of Suarez. They're 2 completely different players. And, I mean, I know they've both got their off-the-field issues, but I mean, one season later and only 4 goals.
Yeah.
It was a disaster.
At the time, I remember thinking that it was a pretty decent signing, though. Like, it had a bit of risk to it, but, like, it definitely had a high upside, but it just didn't pay out.
Yeah, could have been a high risk, high reward situation, but
Yeah. He didn't really fit in with the rest of the players in the team, and his head was never quite in it. I don't know.
Do you know what's interesting is because I don't think it was the same season, but it was in a similar sort of a couple of years where I think Liverpool paid 16 million for Mario Balotelli and Arsenal paid 16 million for Danny Welbeck. And I know, like, when you sign a player, you think about the potential, and obviously Balotelli has far more, like, a much higher potential than Danny Welbeck. But when you consider the servants, like what they were for the club, Danny Welbeck wasn't incredible, but he did, a job on a lot more regular basis
Yeah.
for Arsenal. So I think sometimes it's weird, but you have to consider personality, and I think that is what detracts from Balotelli's footballing ability, is that there's so much going on in his head, clearly.
I mean, I think Balotelli played in the same couple of seasons when Liverpool's forward options were Mario Balotelli, Fabio Borini, and Ricky Lambert.
Ricky Lambert.
So that is the ultimate juxtaposition to Liverpool's front three right now.
Legend.
The banter era, man.
Honestly,
Mate,
they defined it.
It was from 2018 to 2013, basically. Awful times.
It must be worth it to go from the shittest club, not the shittest club, obviously, but like the club with the highest expectations and the lowest performance levels, to the best club in probably the world, to be honest.
I guess, yeah, definitely, but then
Big
it's not worth it.
statement from Hal Fish there. Wow.
Yes, I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't really argue, but it'll be really unfortunate if you guys come out of here with no silverware from this season.
agreed.
I want to actually, before you finish this team, no, you probably already did just finish it, but I want to make a point, or rather, I want to ask a question. Apologies, I've had
Come on, spit it out, Hal. What's that?
I want to ask you, Danny, because I know you're a reasonable fan. You're not quite as angsty and as impatient as other football fans. But obviously, of all the teams in England, if they call off this season, you probably have the most to lose. So how do you feel about the whole situation?
I mean, it's a really difficult one because it's not just for Liverpool, it's for top four, the fight for the top four, it's fight for relegation, it's fight for promotion from the Championship, and then going down the leagues. It probably has more of a financial impact for teams that are in the Championship and League One, but I think in times like this, you kind of have to put football aside to some extent and like focus on the more important issues of health and safety of not only sports people but the general public. So I think if it gets to a point where we get to maybe the start of May and there's still no exact return date for the Premier League, I think as much as it hurts me to say, you might have to void the season. But I think before the Premier League, I think the main point for me is I'm not quite sure how they can start a new season without finishing this one. There's too much to lose for. It's not so much Liverpool. There's too much to lose for the fight between the Premier League and the Championship. There's so much money involved. I don't know how they can leave it as it is.
Yeah.
What if they just took off where, basically they're leaving off now at the beginning of next season, whether that be in the summer or whenever, things clear up a little bit?
For me, I think you have to finish this season before you can go on to a new season. And that obviously that's easy for me to say as a Liverpool fan, but if you relegate the 3 teams that are in the relegation zone right now, I mean, some teams might have better run-ins than the other teams and they might have been targeting other fixtures. And for me, it would sit uneasy even for like teams like Sheffield United and Wolves. They've had a great chance of actually getting Champions League football this year. And I just feel like it's unfair for them to have that hard season taken away within just one decision. It wouldn't quite sit easy with me.
But so if it got to a point where you couldn't restart until like August, September, would you want them to then postpone the following season to finish this one still?
I mean, it gets to a point where you're going to have to postpone something. I mean, do you postpone the FA Cup and the and the Champions League? But then you're gonna get people complaining about that, especially Man City fans. It's the best chance to win it, and especially with their ban coming up, you're gonna have to disappoint someone. It just someone's gonna have to make some strong decisions. It's a really difficult one.
Do you think that maybe after this time period there may just be kind of an appetite to get back to normal and just start the next season and continue as if this never happened?
I mean, that would make sense, but I could take it as a Liverpool fan. I really could, but I do feel like there'd be appeals from different teams. There'd be procedures you have to go through, and it's going to take just as long to iron all that out to start a new season than it would be to just, I don't know, you don't really want to avoid next season either. Something is going to have to give.
Can I just say,
yeah.
Sorry, can I just say, like, if I was a Liverpool fan, I would say we don't know when the league will resume, but we can know whether we're going to start that league again or finish this league. Yeah. So, like, how many games left in the Premier League season are there? Is it about?
There's 9 games for most teams, and there's 10 for a few teams that have got a game in hand.
Yeah. Oh, so we're really down that? I didn't know it was that low, to be honest.
Yeah, so there's 9 or 10 games left. So I think it is weird because if you start a season in, if you pause it and then resume it 4, 5, 6 months time, it is bizarre. But this is like insane. You have Liverpool who are 3 or 4 games. Ben, why are you laughing? You're putting me off.
I think the Kraken's got
recorded discussion and Ben is laughing right now. Like,
Kraken's got Hal struggling to spit out his words.
So either way, what happens at the end of the season, it'll be really interesting, I think, with the whole virus to see how everything plays out with the Premier League. And thank you, Danny, our resident Liverpool expert, for giving us your opinion on the matter as well. Moving on, we thought it would be different and kind of interesting to go through our starting 11 of alcohol to stick with the same theme here. And I think, Ben, you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so essentially, we're all in lockdown here, as we know. Half of the globe is cooped up in their houses. So we thought it would be a good idea to go through the starting 11 of our favorite alcohols, and we kind of will justify which alcohols fit in each position of the field based on, how they're used in a night out and that sort of thing. But I think that we're going to start with Hal, who has our goalkeeper of our alcohol 11. Hal, what do you got?
Yeah, so for other positions, it sort of makes more sense. You can explain it more clearly. You can reference players who fit the position. But for a goalkeeper, it just sort of felt right that it was a G&T. I just picture Iker Casillas in a short sleeve T-shirt in the summer. And when I was considering it, I threw to Danny, and Danny Danny, you agreed, didn't you?
I think I said that you can't really go through a good night out without a G&T at some point, and you can't win a football match without a goalkeeper.
I think that says enough.
What? It's just a safe drink for me, so it works well in the goalkeeper position. So yeah, that works well for our goalkeeper. Thank you, Hal. So we're gonna move on to the back line now, and we'll start with our right back. Danny, what you got for us?
So I've gone with Carlin for the right back. My reasoning behind this is, as Jamie Carragher's famous quote to Gary Neville, "Nobody wants to grow up being a right back." If you walk into a pub, nobody really wants a pint of Carlin as their first choice, but it's always there. It's always an option. So I've gone with Carlin as our right back.
Fair enough. I mean, nobody really signs up to play right back, so I'll go with that. I will say I always end up with a pint of Carling at some point in the night. So I guess it's like the fallback position. Sorry to all the right backs out there. But yeah, great choice. So we'll move on to the center backs. Hal, I think that you are going to run us through our first center back position. What you got?
Yeah, so I think when you think of a centre back, you just think of somebody reliable. And when I think of sort of living near London, you go into a pub and you want to order a pint, and if you order this drink, I think you're always safe. You know, you're not going to get ripped off. And I think it's a Doom Bar, which for those who don't know is a nice ale, like a nice British ale. It makes me think of like Tony Adams, you know, back when Arsenal could defend, just a sturdy centre back. So I think an ale, a nice Doom Bar. That will be the first centre back for me.
I think that works perfectly because the Doom Bar ales are what all the old guys in the bar drink, and I feel like that, you know, the old guys in the bar are the same people that are really supportive of the center backs. Like, oh, that's a proper football right there. Like, he's getting stuck in. And I'm imagining him saying that while he's sipping on a nice glass of Doom Bar. So great choice, Hal.
Beautiful.
I think that I will be taking the next center back partner to our Doom Bar, and I think we're going to run with the Guinness. It's a safe drink, easy to drink while you're watching football. It's kind of a go-to. You're not gonna get too crazy on the Guinness. You know, a really safe drink. It'll work well for the center back position, and I think it pairs nicely with an ale. So we'll go with the ale and Guinness combo at center back. What are your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I would say that was as much as you need a defence to be firm and just withhold any attack. You know, Guinness and ale. I mean, they're not leaking a lot of cheese. That's not David Luiz, is it? You know, that's proper. That's proper centre backs. You know, it's Terry Butcher.
They're not leaking goals. Guinness and ale. They've got it locked down back there. They're gonna make sure that you get through the game with no goals conceded. You know, clean sheets on deck. I think it's a really safe pair of drinks there.
Absolutely. I think, Becky, you've got one of the fullbacks, do you not?
Yeah, so moving on to our left back, we're gonna go with Strongbow Dark Fruits for this position. It's kind of like the Carling in terms of, like, it's not necessarily your first choice as a cider drink, but you can still rely on it on a night out, and it's got that little bit of sugar, that little bit of kick to kind of change things up and maybe go up and attack a little bit more when needed. So Strongbow Dark Fruits in the left back position.
Gotta love it. Gotta have a left back that can every now and then get up the field and, you know, whip in a cross or two, right, Danny?
Andy Robertson, shout out.
Beautiful. All right, so we're going to move on to our midfield, and we are going to go with the 4-3-3 formation today. So we're going to have more of a holding midfielder, a creative midfielder, and an attacking midfielder. For our defensive type midfielder, we've gone with the Irish Car Bomb, which I don't know if this is a popular drink actually amongst you Brittoners out there.
Not.
But it's something that I've drank quite frequently in the United States, and essentially, like many other bomb drinks, it involves dropping a little shot of something into a larger beverage. The Irish Car Bomb specifically is a shot of Bailey's with a little cream dropped into a Guinness, and I thought that would work out perfectly for our defensive midfielder position because you've got the Guinness, you've got the nice strong defensive qualities of the Guinness, a safe beverage, but you're dropping in a little shot of creative flair, a little Bailey's, a little craziness, a little, you know, energy. And then you down it all in one go, and there you go. Our defensive midfielder locked in. What do you think?
I can't argue with that description whatsoever.
That is a great explanation. Fair play.
Beautiful. All right, well, we'll move on to our creative midfielder. Hal, what you got?
This one is, I would argue, the easiest of all the footballing positions to compare to an alcoholic beverage. Because when you think of red wine, what do you think of? Class, pure ability, relaxation, you know. And what footballer would you compare that with? Pirlo, obviously. You know, Pirlo, Xavi, that sort of classy player. So I don't even know if I have to sort of elaborate more on that point. When you think of Pirlo, you think of a glass of red wine. And that's as far as I'll go with it. I won't waste any more of your time.
Yep. No reason to waste any airwaves here. I think that's the most obvious choice of the day. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, something strong, full-bodied, and consistent. Can't go wrong with that.
Pirlo and a red wine are synonymous at this point. I can just already picture a nice Merlot spraying balls around the pond. So that works out well. And I think we're going to bring it back to Hal for our attacking midfielder. Or I guess it's more of a false nine type position. But what you got, Hal?
Okay, so this position is very, very important to me. It's one of the reasons. Not only did I start watching football, but that I also started this god awful podcast. But essentially, the man is Dennis Bergkamp, who is the very definition of shamble. If you're not sure how to describe this podcast to your friends, just ask them to watch a compilation of Dennis Bergkamp playing football, because it's a beautiful thing. I don't even really know where to go with this description. He's just an incredible footballer, and it is an incredible drink. It's champagne, it's the best of the best. It's what you drink on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve. It transcends one year into the other. So just fucking enjoy Dennis Bergkamp. It's amazing.
I think what we're trying to say is it's a drink for intellectuals, for the high class, for for the highest of quality of footballer. And I would say that generally, the best players, well, especially when they're young, end up in that type of attacking, free reign, false nine role. So great pick. All right, and next up, we will move into our front line. We've got a front three, and on the left wing, we will start with tequila. I don't think that there was a way that we could have made a starting 11 of alcohol and not included tequila. It is the wild card beverage, and for that reason, it was perfect for a left wing position. We compared it to St. Maximin in the Premier League, the footballer from Newcastle, in that you never really know what you're going to get from the guy. Some days he's really going to hurt the back line, and then other days he's just going to be, dribbling down blind alleys and dark corridors. So tequila, it works out well. When you drink tequila, you don't know, it might be the best night of your life, or you might end up in a ditch. So
I have no other words.
I'm wrecked. I can't lie. I can't contribute.
All right. Tequila for the left wing. That works out well. And up next, we've got a striker, which I think that we're going to have Danny go into in more depth. Danny, what alcohol works best at the striker position?
I mean, taking into consideration, you've got champagne as the holding striker, the number 10 in the formation. As champagne, you need, with the elegance and the brilliance of champagne, you need the ultimate juxtaposition to complete the ultimate partnership. So I've gone with a WKD Blue. I'd compare this to probably a Jamie Vardy. I mean, it gives you a quick effect. It gives you a wild, manic side, possibly at 2 a.m. in the club. And that basically replicates how Jamie Vardy plays his football on the pitch. There isn't much reasoning behind his running. It's just fantastic, energized sprinting across the pitch.
It's just that drunken 2 a.m. energy, and that's the energy that Jamie Vardy brings every day. It's the energy that you want from your striker, especially on the defensive side of things. Perfect pick, Danny. I love it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, obviously, Jamie Vardy is a guy who's probably more synonymous with alcohol than any other elite Premier League striker of all time. I mean, he's a guy who, I haven't done the research, but I'm pretty sure he used to, on a evening before his game, he would grab a bottle of vodka and fill it with Skittles, and then wait for those Skittles to absorb with that vodka, and then just chew them one by one to just get wrecked slowly by consuming those Skittles. So, I mean, he's a guy who just committed to the process of getting drunk.
Yeah, definitely has a bit more of a manic, wild side, as Danny referenced. The same thing the WKD Blue can provide for you on a night out.
Beautiful. And for all of you aspiring Premier League strikers out there,
Vodka.
eat alcohol or eat vodka-soaked Skittles, and you'll make it one of these days. All right, right winger is the only position left on our starting 11. We will actually go into a manager. But Becky, what do you have for us for our right winger?
For our right winger, we had to go with something that was pure class, pure quality, a true kind of David Beckham style drink. So I've gone for a martini, and in good old James Bond fashion, it's got to be shaken, not stirred. It's got to provide enough to shake it up, enough to be a little different, but it's got to be pure class. And so yeah, the martini is the right drink for this position.
Naturally. Classy, slick, elegant, everything you want from a right winger. What do you think, guys?
I like it a lot.
All right, so that was our starting 11 for the Alcohol XI, but we still have a manager. Becky, you're going to take charge of this position. Who is the alcohol manager for our 11?
So for our starting 11 for the manager, it kind of had to be something that was viewed as, one of the most elite of drinks, the thing you always have on your desk waiting to have a drink with someone on your nice, table, ready to go. And for that one, we've gone for a nice scotch on the rocks, thinking of a Sir Alex Ferguson drink here. You know that when somebody came into Fergie's office, he had that scotch ready to go to share a drink with someone. And so that's got to be the go-to on this one to wrap up our starting alcohol XI.
As a manager, I think that just makes complete sense. It's a sophisticated drink. It's a drink that you sip on when you're contemplating, matchups and 11s and who's going to start and who's not going to start. It works out perfectly. What do you guys think?
I think Scotch on the rocks is one of those drinks that it's getting late at night. You've come back from a busy day at work. It's there in the nice glass bottle on the desk in the dining room. You crack open the lid, pour a nice little shot of whiskey on 3 ice cubes, and you sip it away. So perfect.
Beautiful.
So last week we asked everybody for their opinions on it's hard to define it as the most hated 11, but I think that probably is what it comes down to. So we asked everybody for their opinions on the players they liked the least in the Premier League era. And Ben, you started with a keeper, and it got a bit of fight back. But so who did you have in goal?
It did. We had Lloris Karius in goal, but it got a little bite back from some of the Liverpool supporters on Twitter. They think that one moment shouldn't define the man, and that he actually had a couple of good performances for Liverpool. But in my eyes, when you cost the club such a big trophy, and not one mistake, but 2 big mistakes in such a big game, you deserve to be in a team like this. So that's my justification for the choice.
Yeah. So we have Lloris Karius in goal for his massive faux pas in the Champions League final. I think a lot of Liverpool fans probably quite dislike him, quite hate him. Danny, in right back, we have a Chelsea defender. Who's that?
So in right back, we've got Cesar Azpilicueta. I'm not going to lie, he's a really good footballer. He's diverse. He can play across the back 4. Really, really good player. But every time I watch him in a live game, he's always at the referee. He's always trying to get a reaction out of the opposition players. I mean, it's hard to like him. He's a very dislikable person. I mean, with 2 Arsenal fans on the podcast now, I'm sure you could agree with me. I mean, he's an awful person.
Absolutely. I mean,
he's a terrible person. I'm so sick of that. But I'm sick of his face. I'm sick of the way that he defends. I'm sick of the little smirk that he makes when Chelsea scores. I'm
Do you know
sure I'm not the only person. I'm sure that there's fans across the UK and across the globe that dislike Azpilicueta, but I have a personal vendetta against this man.
he's such a prick, man. Like, you know, when Arsenal played Chelsea recently and it ended 2-2 with that fantastic Gabriel Martinelli goal. So what happened was Chelsea took the lead and Arsenal got a red card, and then we made it 1-1, and that felt like that would be enough. But then Chelsea snuck a goal, and it was Azpilicueta who scored it, and he ran away with his tongue hanging out of his mouth, this little cheery celebration. An absolute prick. And then, of course, Hector Bellerin did what he did. He protected the nationwide, the worldwide environment by scoring a goal against Chelsea. Just fuck them. And that wiped the smile off his face. But we'll move on to the next position, which is centre-back. And in centre-back, Ben, you sort of covered it on the podcast prior to this one. So who do you have there?
So for the centre-backs, we previously selected Mustafi and John Terry. Pretty self-explanatory. John Terry, definitely one of the most disliked players, I would say, of the past 10 years in the Premier League. And Mustafi is just a absolute liability. So that's why we chose those two for center backs. Please listen to our previous podcast if you want the full explanation, but that is the quick and abbreviated explanation.
And to left back, we want to go to somebody who is a brilliant player. I wouldn't deny it, but I think for personal reasons, I wouldn't feel comfortable suggesting his name. So I'm going to throw to a Liverpool fan because this is just sort of his own perspective on it. So Danny, who have you got? We've gone for Ashley Cole. I mean, if I had to choose my all-time Premier League starting 11, I would put him first choice left back without a doubt. But if we're doing a most hated 11, I feel like his off-the-field issues, cheating on his wife, not on. No.
I mean, his reaction to that and his profile on off-the-field issues, I just feel like you have to put his on-the-field qualities and skill to one side and just say he's a bit of a knob.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. Brilliant footballer, less brilliant human being. But, you know, in case he's listening, sorry, Ashley.
All right, so that was our back line for the worst/hated 11 in Premier League history. And we're going to move on to our midfield. Thanks to all of the suggestions on Twitter and other social media platforms, by the way. The first central midfield player that was suggested from our fans out there was Joey Barton. So what is the initial reaction from our panel here?
So I reckon Joey Barton, he was a very good player. When I was coming through as a football fan, I was quite excited about Joey Barton. I thought he was a very good player. I thought he had passion. He had everything you sort of want when you're a young lad. But as he got older, I think he just sort of got involved in the wrong side of football, where it was less about ability and more about just sort of disarming the opposition by little kicks. And, you know, I don't have to go into much detail, but I think he was quite an unaccommodating footballer to play against. And I think, did he recently get banned for betting on football? Do you guys remember that?
I definitely heard something about that, but you're definitely right. He definitely mastered the dark arts, the little kicks, the little stomps, even the little digs on social media he was a master of. But it did not hold up well as far as fans were concerned. And I think that he definitely deserves to be on this most hated 11.
Yeah, I think he's definitely just not a pleasant character, in all honesty. So we'll chuck him into our midfield three, and it will be a three. So of the other two, Becky, who have you got as a recommendation?
We've got to go with Marouane Fellaini for this one. Also made my Man United most hated starting 11. Just get subbed on at 70 minutes and immediately get a yellow card every single time without fail, and just did not ever enjoy watching him play, to be honest. So he's got to be an obvious choice for me.
We mentioned this in the last podcast, but I'll bring it up again because it's very relevant. One of my favorite moments of all time, it involves Jack Wilshere and Marwan Fellaini. They squared up. And I will say, if I was a betting man, I would throw money on Jack Wilshere in that fight. What do you guys think?
I mean, for me, as an Arsenal fan, I think we already touched upon it in the last podcast, but I would follow Jack to hell and back. You know, I reckon, you know, I would hop on his little squat shoulders and I would say, you know,
I mean, this is one of shout out to if he's listening. One of Inam Yappi's questions: who would win in a fight, Jack Wilshere or Marouane Fellaini? I mean, the obvious choice is Fellaini, but you have to look at a few other skill sets.
Is it? Because you have to look at the dog in the fight as well as just the pure physical attributes.
I feel like Jack Wilshere's got that fight inside to him. He's like a terrier. He wouldn't give up.
I mean, I said this on the last podcast. British Bulldog.
Exactly. Perfect. That's the exact description of him.
He doesn't fight fair. He's more of like a street rules type guy. So he wouldn't be afraid to throw in a couple nut shots, maybe bite, scratch. He'll do whatever it takes. So I take Jack.
But do you know what? Do you know who would challenge not only Jack, not only Marouane? He would think these guys as a pretender to the throne. He's a Sunderland midfielder. Danny, who would you put is your third midfielder?
I mean, if you've got Joey Barton in midfield, you need a partner in crime. You need someone that is going to defend you till the end. And for me, that would be Lee Cattermole. I mean, I don't know about you, but if your team, especially when Liverpool were facing up against Lee Cattermole, I feared for every single one of my players' ankles, their knees, their Achilles, everything. He wouldn't hold back in a challenge. He's guaranteed to get at least 2 red cards a season, 10 to 15 yellows a season. But he's that sort of player that you need in your midfield that isn't afraid to get their foot stuck in. And there's a lack of those sort of players around these days.
I think that a midfield three of Joey Barton, Marwan Fellaini, and Lee Cattermole is a deadly combination of the opposition midfield. That is a bone-breaking, foul-inducing, red card-creating midfield.
I mean, if Xavi, Iniesta, and Busquets came up against Fellaini, Cattermole, and Barton, do you think that Xavi, Iniesta, and Busquets would make it out alive?
I think that the apocalypse would just occur right then in the world. I don't know what to say about that. That's like the three opposites just meeting at once.
I reckon it's like when you're like 15 and you're choosing what shin pads to buy, and you know like the shin pads, they had the ankle protectors or they had the big old shin guards. But like these days, you would just choose the lightest one. But like fucking like Barton, Cattermole, Fellaini, you'd be wearing like cricket pads. You know, you just want to defend yourself.
But yes, nevertheless, that is a midfield that you would not want to come up against, and a midfield that has created a name for themselves as a hated trio. So we're going to move on to the forward position. This is actually the last position of our most hated 11. Just a reminder, last week we chose Diego Costa and Luis Suarez as 2 of the front 3. And we're going to unveil the third of our forward partnership now. Becky, what do you have for us?
Don't remember who we put in.
I
don't remember who the other forward is.
How? Because I think I'll get it. How? What you got?
So, as you said before, we have Diego Costa and Luis Suarez, who are just absolute swine if you consider them as human beings and footballers. Obviously, brilliant footballers. And a man who also meets that criteria is Emmanuel Adebayor, who, for Arsenal, I think he had won maybe 2 like seasons at the top of his game. But then imagine if you join a club and they propel you to a status of superstardom, and then the next time you play them because you move to another club, you score a goal and you sprint 90 meters across the field to knee slide in front of their opposition fans and antagonize them so much. I mean, you guys must know who I'm talking about. It's Emmanuel Adebayor, and I think he's a prick.
Disrespectful, and he'll never gain my respect again. He deserves to be in this 11.
I mean, speaking from a neutral, watching that all take place, seeing Adebayor score for Man City and run across 90 yards, slide across in front of Arsenal fans, it was slightly quite funny. But obviously, from a Liverpool fan, if Suarez scored for Barcelona and did the exact same to Liverpool fans, I'd be furious. So I understand the inclusion.
This sort of leads me to a point where, what do you guys feel about, because you mentioned Suarez before, if a former player joins another team and scores against you, how do you feel about if he celebrates? Because I think, like, fair enough, you joined another club. Like, the thing with me is that Adebayor did the whole 20-yard knee slide in front of the opposition fans. But Becky, so you've got like, say Rashford scores a goal for Roma. He joins Roma in the summer and then he comes back and scores. Do you want him to celebrate? Like, there's a level, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think it just depends on how it's done. I don't think there's anything wrong with celebrating a goal, even if it's against your own club, but there's a respectful way to do it. I think, like, RVP, Robin Van Persie, is a good example when he played for United, scoring against Arsenal, and I think he just turned away and, high-fived his teammates and left it at that. There wasn't a big knee slide. There wasn't a big celebration. It doesn't have to be made kind of a show of it. It's just, you kind of have to acknowledge you've scored but move on.
Do you know what? That raises like an important issue within my mind, because such was my hatred for Van Persie at that time, that the sheer fact that he scored against us, it didn't matter what he did. I was fucking fuming. I was so angry. But you're right. He probably was quite respectful in the heat of the moment. But just because he'd signed for our rival club and then scored against us, had the temerity to score against us, I think that's quite upsetting. But I don't know, Danny, what did you think? Because didn't Suarez score against Liverpool quite recently?
Yeah, because we played in the semi-final in the Champions League last year. His goal, very good goal. I'll hold my hands up. His celebration wasn't too over the top. It didn't antagonise Liverpool fans to any extent. So it was more than okay. It was just his behaviour during the match of sort of diving, making the most of contact, which is exactly what he did for Liverpool. So I can't argue too much. But in terms of the celebrating, I think celebrating in front of or against a former team is more than okay. It's just the intention to antagonise the opposition fans, which is an ethical or moral dilemma for me.
All right, well, that sounds like it is our worst starting 11 of the past, decade of Premier League history. Just to run through it one more time quickly, we've got a goalkeeper of Loris Karius, a backline of Ashley Cole, Shkodra Musafi, John Terry, Cesar Azpilicueta, a midfield of Joey Barton, Marwan Fellaini, Lee Cattermole, and a front line of Emmanuel Adebayor, Luis Suarez, and Diego Costa. A despicable group, to say the least. But thank you to everyone that helped us finish that on social media. We really, really appreciate all of the interaction. But it's been a good podcast. What do you think, guys?
I mean, it's been a pleasure to be here for the first time.
I think it's been a ridiculous episode of this podcast, but also a super fun one. And always good to have new guests on the show. Our resident Liverpool expert in Virgil's pocket joining us tonight. And I don't know about you, Hal, but I don't think I've had enough drinks for this podcast. I think you're feeling it already, but it's been pretty fun.
I'm genuinely embarrassed. I'm so fucked up. I haven't left the house in like 6 days. It's so bad. You can keep this in, but just don't force me to listen back to it. I'm honest.
All I know is when this lockdown opens back up, it's gonna be the most incredible night out of my life. So
I love all you guys. Take care.
We love you too, Hal. I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for hopefully having made it through this marathon of a podcast. We appreciate everyone listening to us. That is a wrap for tonight.